In 1700, India was worth a staggering $21 trillion, large economy by today's standards. The country was ruled by the Mughal Empire. Its economy was so large and so powerful that it was bigger than all of Western Europe combined. 250 years later, India was one of the poorest countries in the world. So, what went wrong? It all started with a single British ship docking in Surat in 1608 that granted permission from the 4th Mughal king Jahangir to trade in Surat. By the mid 20th century, an estimated $45 trillion had been stolen from India, and an estimated 35 million people had died in multiple famines. It wasn't the British government that seized India, but a small private company headquartered in a tiny office in London. The private company went on to become one of the most powerful corporations of the world has ever known. It went on to conquer large part of South Asia and commanded an army of 250,000 people. By the 17th century, Spanish and Portuguese controlled the trade from the east. But Britons wanted to start trading of cotton, silk, tea and spices. The Indian spices which became very popular in Europe then. Queen Elizabeth signed a royal charter allowing the company to sail to the East India on the behalf of the crown. At first they were not allowed to trade, but later on King Jahangir, the son of Akbar the Great, gave permission to them, and so the East India Company was born. In 1613, the first British factory was set up at Surat, but the country was not here for just business. They had a private army. By 1757, as the Mughal dynasty went into decline, the company waged war on the last Nawab of Bengal and his French allies. They seized control of the entire state of Bengal. The state was badly hit by war and then by famine. The entire Bengal treasure was loaded onto 100 boats and sent down the Ganges and onward to the company's Calcutta headquarters. He collected taxes and customs from local Indians, which was then used to purchase goods and export them to England. So they took control over the land, charged local people to live there, and then used the money to get rich. After Bengal, the company went on to seize other regions like Bihar, Odisha, and then in 1799, they defeat one of the powerful ruler of their time, Tipu Sultan, and conquered Mysore. And so on, even Delhi, the Mughal capital of India, and everything south of it. The company's shareholders elected merchant statesmen who dictated policy for the people who lived there. At its peak, the company generated almost half of the British trade at the expense of Indians. But in 1857, a rebellion began to spread. It all started with Indian sepoy serving in the company's army and then grew. It lasted 18 months and Indians were brutally suppressed by the company rule in India. In 1858, the British government finally ended company rule in India. The end was brought upon the distrust in the company and the rebellion, but the move was to entrench the British rule, not withdraw it. The country was transferred from the company to the crown. The remaining vestiges of the Mughal dynasty were abolished, and the Emperor Bahadur Shah was exiled to Burma. Queen Victoria was proclaimed Empress of India, and so the Mughal rule completely ended and the British Raj began. The crown ruled over almost all of modern-day India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. Some regions were still controlled by the local princes, who was loyal to the British government. The Queen promised that Britons would work harder for the benefits of India and Indians. But did they? To maintain colonial rule, they used a divide and conquer strategy. They pitted Indians against one another, making the Hindu caste system rigid and deepening communal divides between Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. They make their supporters powerful rulers of a particular area and gave them control of all of their local people, land, and wealth. And of course, there were different rules for the British and Indians. The Indians weren't allowed into the civil services for most of the time the British ruled. The justice system was also discriminatory. And then there were the famines. Between 1770 and 1947, an estimated 35 million Indians and 11 massive famines died. The British didn't believe governmental intervention in Indian famine. The Bengal famine in 1943 was a direct result of failed policy. The Britons restricted interstate trades and diverting supplies to the soldiers. It got so bad that starving people threw themselves in front of trains and parents dumped their children into wells. Then there was the post migration. The British moved an estimated 1.6 million Indians to North America, Africa, and the Pacific Islands. They were forced to travel and work in harsh conditions. That's if they survived the journey. They will come to India again, and if not, so no problem. Britons also dragged India into World War I and deployed 1.5 million Indian soldiers. 60,000 of them never returned home. In 1919, in response to a protest against unlawful arrest, British soldiers massacred unarmed Sikh men, women, and children who had gathered to celebrate the Sikh New Year in Jallianwala Bagh. More Indian troops were deployed to fight for British in World War II, and the princely state loyal to the crown donated cash for the war effort. But also Britons gave some good stuff to Indians like a railway and tea. The British built railways so that they could efficiently transport Indian goods to the port and then out of the country. British investors invest at the expense of Indian. In fact, they charge 9 times more for each mile of the railway than in United States, and investors on the railroad got a guaranteed return on investment. The British introduced tea to the Indians, but at a very heavy cost. The tea came at the cost of felling vast forests, stripping the indigenous people who lived there of their own land and exploiting poorly paid Indian laborers. In fact, the tea was for export only, because what little that was left was too expensive for most Indians to buy. So they work hard for the British, but at the end get nothing. So let's talk about their independence. World War II hit the Britain's economy so badly. Also, the rebellions and independence movement was on peak in India. Britons decided they could not run India after World War II. Talks of the Britons leaving led to communal violence. The violence, which was fueled by Britain's divide and rule strategy. Britons wanted to get out of India as fast as possible. Radcliffe, a British lawyer who had never been to India before, was tasked with carving up the map into a country for Hindus and one for Muslims in 36 days. But no one told the Indians where those lines were until the actual day of independence. This led to mass panic and chaos, which fueled fear. While an estimated 15 million people were migrated in one of the greatest migration in the history, between 1 and 2 million of them died because of large-scale violence, starvation, and disease. At least 75,000 women were abducted. Muslims migrate to East and West Pakistan, while Hindus and Sikhs went the other way, to India.